Morning.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning, madam.
Morning. Good morning.
So, as I said, we'll have our first session, which will be delivered by Dr. Shalini Tiwari. Let me briefly introduce her to the participant. So, Dr. Shalini is an associate editor with Emerald Emerging Market Case Studies Journal. She's an associate professor in the area of strategy, innovation, and entrepreneurship at IMT Ghaziabad. She has done her PhD in strategic management from MDI Gurgaon, India. Having served in various disciplines, she has gathered a rich experience of 22 years. She has successfully delivered training programs to well-known corporate giants such as Reckitt Benckiser, Coca-Cola, Delhi Airport Authority of India, the Times of India, MDocs, Hero MotoCorp Limited, and many other well-known organizations. Without taking much time, I would welcome Dr. Shalini. Ma'am, thank you very much for agreeing to deliver this session. I'm sure participants would learn about how to write a good teaching case, and they would be able to solve their queries and doubts at the end of the session through interaction. Thank you, ma'am.
Well, good morning, and thank you very much for inviting me to CPIMR and to this prestigious workshop that you are organizing. It's an extremely relevant workshop, and thank you for introducing me to the participants. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's my duty to, engage with the participants who are interested in case writing. So that is one of my passionate areas. And I have been engaging with a lot of other institutions and participants for internationally and nationally both for understanding that why cases are important and why they need to be written and how they should be written and other kinds of issues that arise with case teaching pedagogies. So thank you for having me. Mhm. I am just opening my set of slides. So what I have done is I'll be running through a few basic set of slides in order to familiarize you as to what is a case study and what needs to go into a good case study. I have also compiled a set of cases over here which are written by me. I can always show you other cases which I use in my sessions which are very effective, and we can have a discussion around them, and you are more than welcome to pose any question. Of course, we can have the Q&A at the end of the session, but in between, if there is a pressing need, then you may please intervene and I will be more than happy to take it up. So let's begin with the session. I am just opening my set of slides, and you can let me know if that is visible. Just give me a moment. So I'm sharing my screen, and so is the presentation visible?
It is visible.
Thank you so much. So there were a couple of things that I was informed about, and that had to be covered during this workshop. Of course, you will have exposure to a lot of other important ingredients which go into case writing. But we'll begin with a very simple way to understand what will make a case effective. So, how to go about with the beginning of writing a case and what needs to go into the entire body of the case and how to pose that challenge which is appealing to the audience. So, that's the entire presentation about. And I will begin with this simple question, which I would want all of us to kind of help me understand. So, you have understood a case study, you might have used case studies in your sessions in various courses. What exactly to you is a case study? What do you mean by this particular term, a case study? Just thoughts, please. It's nothing technical.
A business challenge
So it's a business challenge. Okay. Yes.
which can stimulate the students to think of possible solutions.
That can stimulate students.
It's a detailed examination of particular case within the real life context.
Yeah, am I audible, ma'am? Good morning.
Yes. Yes, please continue.
It is a state of situation where somebody is supposed to be taking some decisions. So there are alternatives available and somebody needs to decide as to which alternative is feasible. The
Okay. Right. So we have a few good points over here. Of course, it's a business challenge which can stimulate the students to think. Then it will raise other questions. Okay. Other questions like, can it be a fictitious case, or should it always be a real case? Right? If we talk about examining the real situation in a business context, then it is going to pose certain other kind of questions that, was the situation really needing a solution? Do you really need to solve it? And what kind of decisions need to be made under these kind of circumstances? And then we have something like state of a situation which needs to be decided upon. So decision making is important here. The focus is on decision making, and by evaluating these set of alternatives, one can decide on the best possible decision or best decision in that given scenario. So what is the purpose of a case study? Why do we need to use it? We can very well go into the classes and we can talk about a lot of business histories. There are good enough organizations which have gone through a huge span of time, and they have experienced a lot of issues, and we have documented histories about them. So we can very well go into the class and talk about that, and probably that can also help the students learn about the business challenges, about making them think. Why do we need a case study?
It helps them feel confident of their decisions. I think that's step one, where real life situation में जाने के पहले they are able to evaluate alternatives and feel confident about the fact that they can decide rather than being quiet about something.
They can feel confident. Valid point, yes, because they have evaluated case studies, so they become confident when they go out in the real world to experience the real world situations or real world challenges. Yes.
Maybe they can test the theories learned in the class against the situations presented to them.
They can test the theories They can test the theories which are studied in the class, and they can see under what circumstances these theories are going to work and under what circumstances they would not. Yes, absolutely. What else?
Yes,
So absolutely, yes, please.
no, it's multi-dimensional. So it's basically boundaryless. It's not about only marketing or finance or HR. So it gives you a holistic perspective of looking at various dimensions and then coming to.
So it's a multi-dimensional situation, and it helps you appreciate how various elements in a real life are intertwined with each other, so that there is no one way to look at the particular issue, but you need to have a wider perspective. Very well taken, right? So, I buy all these statements that you have posed over here. In fact, they're absolutely right, bang on. And the purpose of a case study is to, of course, train a student into what? Into taking decisions. After all, we are training managers. These are the budding managers. They need to go out in the field and make certain decisions. Now, whether these decisions turn out to be good or bad, that is not the concern over here. The idea is to make them think that this is an opportunity for them to evaluate the information which is given to them. How are they going to develop various options to solve that issue? And how will they take up those alternatives, evaluate them, and pick out a certain alternative for action? So deciding, that is the main crux as to why we need to train these students. Otherwise, there are other pedagogies which are also very effective. Okay, we have simulations there, we have role plays there, we have lecture method, which has been the tried and tested method across a variety of institutions. But we have to push these students to make a decision. And when the term decision comes, from where we are going to draw our next strand as to why we need to work the case around a dilemma. So moving forward, this is what you all said, and this is what I have also written, that it refers to a situation faced by a manager. It's basically replicating that real experience with the problems to generate discussion. And the idea is that students should be able to evaluate various perspectives. They need not move into a particular direction. That, as a professor or as a facilitator, is our responsibility. So we have to make them go into all kinds of possible directions and see which one is going to work best for them. So why do we need cases? I think we have already answered it through the earlier slides. I'm not going to spend time over here, but the idea is that cases are one of the richest form of uh, pedagogical interventions. So when we write cases, it gives us an opportunity to provide a whole lot of information to the students. Now, again, there comes a debate that, Harvard, for example, has been propagating for long cases. Okay, they say that if a case is short, if a case is like written within 8 to 10 pages, it may not provide a rich context to the readers, and they will not be able to evaluate it that way. However, there have been now, agreements, and in fact, the discussion and discourses are moving in a direction where people are saying that no longer the span of students is for longer cases, so therefore we need to stick to shorter cases. But whether it is a long case or a short case, it needs to have the relevant information, which is what we have said over here. Background on the institution, industry, the individual, all those things need to be put into that particular case study. Events, especially what led to that kind of a problem, that needs to be evaluated by the students. So enough information should be there when we talk about those events. So if, for example, we are talking about, we developed a case on supply chain of COVID vaccines within India, because that was a big challenge being a, your huge country highly densely populated country. So we need to really understand. And there were pockets where the spread of the COVID virus or the coronavirus was much higher as compared to other segments. So how do we reach them? So event which led to this particular kind of issue on hand, which was the talk about the COVID or the spread of the virus, and what kind of mechanism was trying to control this entire spread of the virus, or which was leading to the spread of the virus. Those events were described in detail. That was very, very important. Also, when we talk about the fictitious and the real cases, I'll come to that debate a little later, but then the information needs to be factual. So whether you're picking it up from a newspaper or an article, or we are picking it up by an interview or through an interview, it needs to have those facts. And facts means they can be verified. So we are talking about verifiable facts. It's not a fact that we mention over there, which you can't find any source to. And the idea is that it should have a learning objective. As you are talking about decision making, what kind of a decision do we expect a student to make in that circumstance? So that will be the learning objective. Okay, what do we need this student to decide upon? Do we need this student to decide upon the inventory levels? Does this student need to decide about the entry level strategies to a market? Does this student need to talk about the segmentation for a certain market? What is the decision? And this decision, it will guide the learning objectives. So making the learning objectives is a crucial part of a case study that we normally write. Next. We also try to, now what has happened is I was attending a few workshops on making case studies a very, very robust tool. So the idea was that what can you incorporate with a case study? Case study in itself is just that written document, but could you incorporate a lot of things? And then we learned all those mechanisms. So of course, presentations are normally made when we try to capture the learning objectives after the session is delivered, or a debrief after the session is delivered. But now what we see is there are ways to incorporate videos in case studies. Audiovisual material is now being incorporated in the case studies, and it is very meaningful. I have also seen a lot of animation going into case studies. Okay, as an associate editor, at least 2 case studies in a year come out which have some kind of animated characters drawn. They're talking to each other, they're presenting the dilemma, they are explaining the situation as to what led them to what led them to this kind of a situation. And animation kind of binds the attention of the readers. So this becomes a very, very critical exercise now for people who are writing cases, that how to make that case more presentable, more effective, and the choicest case among the set of cases which are present over there. So if you can incorporate some kind of a role play, some kind of an exercise, some kind of guest speakers could be invited to deliberate more on the issues, that becomes critical. Now, one of the advantages of a case study is, of course, as it started off by the Harvard Business School structure, is the faculty writing the cases. I'll come to that also in a little while. So when we are writing our cases, especially the primary, information-based case, then we have access to the protagonist, okay, or to other characters which are present in the case. And that is a wonderful, let's say, a leverage, because we can invite those characters to the sessions and they can talk about, what situation they experienced, how did they resolve it actually, what were the repercussions or what were the implications of those decisions later on. So the idea is that you have to engage your readers very, very actively. Ultimately, this is the objective. Okay. And if this objective is to be met, where students learn as well as enjoy the learning and become more confident, as Madam was talking about, then you need to make it very, very rich. Case study should not be used in a very dry sense. We have to incorporate elements which can make it as rich as possible. And we also find that, cases are in fact appropriate. They become a very appropriate tool for all kinds of courses, for all kinds of levels of courses. So undergraduate, of course, is one part. I don't, in our institute, we don't have undergraduate classes, but postgraduate and executive and training courses, case studies become very handy. And we can incorporate a lot of additional readings. Readings can be revised, they can be updated. So it makes a very wonderful scenario in a class when we pick up such kind of cases. Now coming forward, we have, some let's say tips or some kind of ways to look for writing for a case, how to make it the best case that we write. So over here, this is my firm belief. Best cases are the ones that you write for your own courses. Okay. And this is where the first challenge emerges. How? It's not about what do you write about, because you know your subject, you know your course, so you know what to write. But the question is how. Okay, and why how comes is some of the courses, for example, I teach courses on strategy and entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship, to an extent, I can find a lot of information because people are giving interviews. These days, news is talking about the entrepreneurial ecosystem developing in India. So I have that kind of information, but still, what you require is in-depth information, which is what the students are going to experience in the real world. And that becomes a challenge. How do I find it? Where do I go? Whom to approach? Strategy, on the other hand, it is good to find numbers. If the company is listed, then I can have access to annual reports. But that's not what is going to cover the strategy part of it. So we are talking about a strategy making or strategizing. Okay, and there are a lot of facts. There are a lot of facts which are just known within the boundary of the firm. We don't know what is exactly going on. How are they strategizing? How are they planning? How are they implementing? And that becomes a big challenge. So how is one thing? And therefore, it is a good idea to pick up any lead that comes your way. Okay? A lead, any person who is helping you or is showing his willingness or her willingness to help you write a case, please take it up. Okay, grab that opportunity. And that lead could be from a very, very small organization, doesn't matter. At least we begin writing cases, at least we develop that confidence, at least we bring those situations to the class. And smaller organizations sometimes doesn't mean we are talking about some kind of a kiosk or a cart or something. These are all kinds of organization. Decision making has to happen, and we can escalate this or we can scale up this kind of a decision and bring out a scenario in the class where the students learn that decision making. So no matter what is the level of the organization, small, medium, large, whatever lead we gather, please take it up if we are talking about writing a primary case. And hands down, no day, a secondary case will not be able to beat a primary case. Of course, the focus now is more on secondary information-based cases, and we are going to come to that. In fact, what I have seen in last couple of years as my journey as associate editor, that earlier it used to be on the focus on primary cases was quite a lot. Now I have seen that shift happening. And more than 70% of the cases that we receive these days are based on secondary sources. Okay, because we understand that there is some kind of a constraint in access to that information. Sometimes the protagonist moves away from the organization. Sometimes there is a huge lapse in the time when you start writing the case and you send it out for publication and additional information is required, and then the company is no longer interested. So there are a lot of issues which happen, and therefore the focus has slowly and slowly shifted towards secondary information based cases. However, having said all that, we have to do a lot of things when we get into writing cases, but please start writing cases for your courses. You know what has to be covered, and even a small caselet will do. If you have to bring about a certain issue to the class, then do it. So writing a good case study is basically about the issues. Case is about an issue, because issue means you have to take a decision. If there is no issue, then there is no point in taking a decision. There is also a question that I experience. So some cases are analytical in nature, and the other kinds of cases are comprehensive or comprehension-based cases. Comprehension-based cases. Now, what is a comprehension-based case? Comprehension is the situation has been explained in the case, and the solution to that particular situation is also explained. The way it was implemented, that is completely given in the case. So students understand. So students understand what kind of a decision was taken, how it was thoroughly spread out, or how it was thoroughly implemented, and what has been the aftermath of that particular decision, or what have been the implications, right? So then they could debate on the implications, whether they were effective, not effective, what implications will further lead to what kind of problems. That is a different thing. But here the idea is that students understand the situation and how it can be tackled using the best possible solutions. These kind of cases normally we find at the undergraduate level, because there the expectation is that they should first try to understand the context. What issues may arise? How can you look at them through commonsensical understanding or commonsensical decision making? You don't need to have sort of a very high skill set to solve those kind of problems. So here the idea is that they are good for an undergraduate level. If you go by the Bloom's taxonomy, then those are the, to understand something or to comprehend something, those are the kind of learning objectives that we are going to set up. But when we talk about analytical courses, here we are talking about more of postgraduate level and executive level of learning or training, where the situation is complicated, situation has a lot of issues, and it requires a certain understanding of that particular phenomena. So whether you are going to solve that phenomena through a certain framework or a process, we need to be a little clear as to what to give to the postgraduate and the executive students. So normally what happens is we write case study as a story. And story means there has to be an introduction to the organization or to the protagonist or to the situation. Okay, we explain that situation a little more as we go down from that introductory paragraph. It is not basically an introduction, but it's an introductory paragraph. So it will briefly give you that small bit of context, a small bit of information about the person who's taking a decision, a very little information about the incident, but then we elaborate upon it. So elaborating upon the incident, we raise the expectations and raise that excitement in the audience by explaining that situation more, what kind of actions were taken, what kind of issues arose after that particular action, and what emerged out of those actions. Okay, and then we try to close it at a resolution stage where the entire discussion is now focused in a case study. So the idea is that students should be able to vividly experience that this was happening. They should feel that they are part of that decision making process. They should feel that they are able to visualize the situation by themselves, and then they can take up the decision on their own if they were in the shoes of the protagonist. So the idea is to put them on the fence. The idea is to make them wear the shoes of the protagonist so that they understand the situation. And that is where writing as a craft emerges. So, and I always promote that, write small cases, write cases about simple issues, Okay, you don't have to begin with something huge or something big, but then make yourself very comfortable with what you're writing and what you have used that as in the classroom. So pick up a small case study, take it to your classroom, discuss it, deliver it, understand what is the feedback. Are the students enjoying it, not enjoying it? What are the gaps there? And then you get into that particular hobby or particular passion of writing cases. That will come a little later. Now, what exactly goes into writing of a case study is, um, and this is very critical. It's extremely critical. The question is, where do I begin, or what do I write about? So, you're not just going to write a case study because there is somebody out there um, willing to help you write it. Okay. The idea is, as a professor, as a facilitator, I have to be clear. What are the theories or the concepts that I have to teach? Okay. So, for example, in case of a strategy course, and people, I'm sure many of you would be there who have taught a strategy or some other courses, like in case of marketing or operations or HR, OB or anything else, there are a lot of issues which need to be understood by the students from the organization perspective. I can go ahead and give sessions and lectures and other things, even crafting a vision statement. Okay, crafting a vision or a mission statement. We have wonderful material over there, and I can ask them to do that for a fictitious company or a hypothetical company and then do it. This is fine. But yes, what is the challenge? Why is it so important for an organization to have a meaningful vision or a mission is important? Okay, or if I have to teach them business level strategy, how is it different from a corporate level strategy? Okay, what kind of international entry uh, market entry mechanisms they are going to study? All these kind of issues are pertinent from the manager's perspective, and therefore I need to have cases around each one of them. So my beginning of a case begins actually with the thought that what is the concept that is critical for me as a professor, and I need to teach it in a context where it is meaningful for my students. So it begins from here. Now, this may lead to a set of questions actually. What kind of questions? For example, one question is, we have already written cases about them. Okay, they're good case studies. For example, corporate level strategy, I teach through a case on Disney Entertainment. Okay, that's a wonderful case study, a long case study, no doubt, but a wonderful case study. International market entry strategies, I teach through a case on Tata's, how they have gone global. Both these cases are very powerful cases. So I already have, a case which fits into this particular concept, okay, or I'm able to teach it. So what is the problem? Why should I write another case? The problem is twofold. One is, these cases may not be updated regularly. So something has happened in the past that is very well understood. But what is Disney doing now? Or in the last 5 years, have they, how have they changed their corporate level strategy? What is the thinking which is going on there? I don't have information about it. So there is a constraint. Okay. Same is the case with Tata. So it is written at a certain point in time. I can know some of their internationalization moves, like the mergers that they have, acquisitions that they have, joint ventures that they have, everything. But now what? Beyond that. So time becomes another constraining factor. They are not updated regularly. The second problem is the context. Every time, and this has become such a big constraint for us, or a hurdle for us, or it's a mindset hurdle basically. Students always talk about, no, but that is not India, so you're talking about Disney, that is not India, that is how it happened there. I perfectly agree with them. Yes, the context is different, and strategy is context embedded. So contextual cases then have to be written. So this is where I then take up a lead. So for example, yes, Disney is a US company. They have had that kind of a context. They have grown through a corporate level strategy. I understand. But why will I then pick up an Indian company to write is because I can update it regularly and it gives them a thorough understanding of an Indian context. So this is what is going to motivate me to pick up a theory or pick up a concept and use an Indian case study to elaborate upon it. The other important thing that one has to look for in a case study is a hook or an interesting, let's say, we call it a hook basically because it ties the story together. Okay, it can be called a dilemma. It can be called a decision point. Those are the terms that have been used to write cases, but it is a hook. Why it's a hook? Because it binds your attention, right? So sometimes you may be, you may be wanting to write a case around your concept, but more than the concept, certain uh, emergent issues are there, or certain things are emerging in the external environment which require attention. They may be need to looked upon from your perspective rather than from somebody else's perspective, right? So that is what the hook is about. So if you talk about demonetization, for example, now one of my colleagues wrote it from an economics perspective, macroeconomics. Okay, somebody wrote it from the behavioral perspective. So that was the organizational behavior perspective. People wrote it from the strategy perspective. Was it really required? Okay. So the idea is that particular phenomena of demonetization, okay, provided a interesting piece of story. Okay, it made you think from different angles. And that was the hook. What was the hook over here? That what was the goal for the government to basically engage in this kind of an exercise? What is the economic implication on the citizens of the country? That was the hook which this professor took. Obi, how did the people behave during this entire period of demonetization, standing in queues, and talking about this particular move as being highly nationalistic move and controlling a lot of things. So the idea was that that hook, uh, uh, it bound the story together and it helped. So that is what we mean by it. Now here, the idea is that we are not looking for a concept and suddenly, we are not looking at an organization, but here we have looked at a phenomena. And through that phenomena, we have been able to explore various concepts. The third important thing is the case has to be sufficiently rich in terms of contextual nuances. As I said, why this makes sense for us to write cases in our own context or in emerging market context is because the setting is different, personalities are different, cultures, issues, the kind of issues that we experience, they're also very different. So therefore, it becomes extremely critical for us now to start looking at organizations which are there in our context, and we need to write cases about them. They give us a lot of richness. And all said and done, even if we don't have a lead in those organizations, at least we would have a lot of published information through which we can write these cases. The thing is, how should students react to the case? Is it sufficiently challenging, interesting? So whenever we pick up the hooks, or whenever we look at the phenomena and the hook to be studied, we look at the tensions. Can we build that decision point into the case, which is sort of a dilemma? It should appear to be a dilemma. It should appear to be you're double-minded. As a manager, should you go in the X direction? Should you go in the Y direction? That should be clearly brought out. And if that is brought out, this is going to really make the case very, very interesting. So whenever I am evaluating cases, and believe me, it's a lot of work. on an average, I get 30 to 35. I mean, on my desk, I'm supposed to get around 40 cases in a year. So anywhere between 30 to 35 cases I get in a year. No, I have to, 30 to 35 is what we are supposed to actually, process. It could be a lot more. So the idea is when we are looking at a case, when I'm going through the case, then I look at it from a student's perspective. That if I'm a student, I'm reading this case, do I feel that, as a manager, I'm supposed to take X scenario or Y scenario into consideration? Would I go with the options over here, or would I go with the options over here? So I have to experience that kind of a dilemma. It should not be a straightforward case. As I said, comprehension cases are only meant to explain the students about a certain, let's say, theory or a certain framework. They have to be more analytical and challenging in nature. So that's what we have to talk about. Is there dynamic tension in the case to produce contentious and competing views? Competing views are going to come from people reading the case in the class. So if you have a class of 30 to 40 to 60 students, the students will tend to side with certain set of options. You might have developed certain alternatives, and there will be a bunch of students who would always emphasize upon one set of alternatives over the rest of the alternatives. And that's what brings about the debate in the class. The discussion goes richer. If everybody is thinking on the same direction, then there is no point in discussing the case. So that is where another question arises. Whenever we are writing cases about, let's say, issues such as related to ethics, or we pick up cases related to, for example, I teach a course on emerging markets, and a pertinent issue in emerging markets is corruption. And the problem that we always feel about this aspect of corruption, corruption, basically bribery. Okay, if there are very many aspects of corruption, but when we are talking about bribery, everybody sitting in the class tends to become moralistic. Everybody. Okay, so we are all Indians, but they will tend to become moralistic, and they would simply say, okay, the protagonist should not accept the bride, or protagonist should not give the bride. Now, it is very easier said than done. If they are in the real situation themselves, probably, they will not be that kind of moralistic. So how do you bring about that tension? Writing such kind of cases becomes a challenge, and therefore you find very few cases which talks about these kind of issues. And this is where our focus is, that let us try to bring out more of these issues where a person feels a personal dilemma, a personal tension, that should I do this, should I not do this. That is where a good case comes out, comes out as a very relevant case for the class. Would the case lend itself to interesting and useful teaching and learning approaches? That is another garnish which you can apply for a case. So can it be paired with a simulation? Does it allow for a role play? As I said, using of audiovisual aids, that's extremely important. If we can do all these things, then of course it's an embellishment to the case, and it makes at least the editors, we like to pick up those cases very fast, and we would like to really push them a lot, because that is what people are looking for. And also in the class, they add much more richness. So that's like an added advantage. So writing case, whenever you are writing a case, please understand the opening paragraph. There are three parts to a case study: the opening paragraph, the body of the case, and the closing paragraph. And when I'm evaluating the opening paragraph, I'm looking at few things in that particular paragraph. One is, does it answer few basic questions? So what is happening in the case? What is the issue? Okay, who is facing that issue? Who's the protagonist? Who has to decide? Okay, why did this issue emerge? Where? So that is where the context comes into picture, and people immediately identify with the context, and when. Timelines are important. Now they have become more important. Earlier, we used to talk about classic cases. We still use them. It's not that classic cases are not used. They are still used. So for example, cola wars continue. I still use. And though they do update it, but it's not updated to that an extent. But it's a wonderful case if I have to teach them, how industry structures are formed. It's a wonderful case. I use that frequently. But then I can't, stop at this particular case. I have to pair this with another case, which is like the Apple case. And then I have to contrast, and then I have to make this understanding much clearer. But the idea is that whenever we are writing a case, we have to try to put in some information about these 5 whys, that what is the issue in the case, who's experiencing this problem or who has to take the decision, who's the decision maker, why did this problem arise, and where did it happen, and what was the timeline, when did it happen. So you present this, that is the opening paragraph. This is where the hook is also built into the opening paragraph. And that is critical. Once you read it, you get to understand and you are immediately motivated to move forward to the body of the case. Now, when we are talking about writing cases, please understand sometimes we tend to get a little overwhelmed with the information that we have. So it's always a good idea to write the story in a chronological order. Okay, what happened? So what happened? Let's say something happened in 2019, but the way the company began, who took over, if there was a change in leadership, so succession planning, all those things, and you can build, and then you can come down to that particular issue. So that's very important. That will give us some kind of a flow to the structure of the case. Contextual information is absolutely critical. Very many times we find that people miss out on the contextual information. Please understand that given on the nature of the course, you need to decide what context you are going to write about. Is it going to be a national context? Are you writing about India? So if India becomes such a, the prime focus, for example, as I said, the supply chain of COVID vaccines. India was the context. We wrote a lot about that context. It could be the industry context. Okay, industry context, for example, I said cola wars continue, Apple. Here it becomes absolutely critical for us to understand what kind of industry they are positioned in. So if it's a carbonated soft drink industry, it's a mobile phone industry, or something could be about like Tesla's entry into China and India. We talk about the electric vehicle industry, right? So the industry has to be the focus. Sometimes, for example, I talked about the Tata case. In that case, the company context is very critical. Okay, you have to understand the nuances about this entire conglomerate, from the time it started to how it started expanding, and what was the motivation to go abroad, to what was the motivation to go global. That is extremely critical. So writing about the company becomes extremely important. It could be about an individual. Okay, so if I'm writing, for example, a leadership case, then to me, the individual and contextualizing of that individual becomes critical. What led to? So if I have to write something about, let's say, let's say about Mr. Tata, okay, leadership lessons from his life, then my focus will be on this individual, how he became an apprentice when he returned from abroad in the Tata companies, okay, over a period of time, like he looked after these, there was a Empire Mills or something like that. He joined then Nelco, Okay, and then moving on, and then of course the Nano, and then taking over Tata Sons. So the entire contextualization is important so that we understand him as a person and people are able to analyze the decisions taken by him. So contextual background is extremely critical. But what you have to realize is too much of information and covering the entire body of the case just on the contextual background is not a good idea. So you have to have a balance between giving information which is relevant for understanding the context and understanding the individual in that context, but also keeping it limited to an extent where we are not missing out on the important information. What are the tensions involved? So decision points, hooks. This is where, what is the tension? Should I do A? Should I do B? Okay. Should I enter into a new market? Should I not enter into a new market? Should I go with a lean management, or should I just go with what I'm doing right now? Should I have, a standardized product for a segment, or should I customize? So these are the tensions. Of course, tensions could be at a very minimal level also. Where do I get money? Should I borrow from a friend, or should I go to a bank? Even this kind of a dilemma is good enough, right? It should be able to, it should be able to hook the student to understand that this is a reasonable problem for a person to solve. A good case usually revolves around at least one major issue. Okay. That is usually simple to identify, but not necessarily easy to solve. As I said, hook has to be there, dilemma has to be there. The options or the alternatives, they are so close to each other. It's not just simply going ahead and picking up the best alternative that, so there would be pros and cons to each alternative. There will be trade-offs for each alternative. And the idea is to present these trade-offs to the students through the discussion. And then they make a very, very informed decision about their alternative. So not just giving them a black and white kind of a scenario, but helping them appreciate that there is always this gray area in all our decisions whenever we are exercising them in real life. And how to make it more relatable, if we can provide quotations from the interviews or from the newspapers, you can pick up the actual sentiments which are reported. Okay, when we make cases based on secondary information, I have picked up a lot of this information from the newspapers where people have gone ahead, given interviews. I've incorporated them into my cases. I'll just show you one example. Now, this is one of the most popular cases, highly download. I mean, it's got the most number of downloads. So as of now, I've crossed 20,000 plus downloads for this case. It's on Malaysia Airlines, and I'll just show it to you. So the idea is, when we are writing the case, context is important, characters are important, location is important, what kind of actions have they taken? You need to elaborate upon all this, but there needs to be a balance between what we are writing, what we are producing, which is important for students to know, and not curtailing that to an extent where it becomes difficult for them to make a opinion about this particular case study or this particular person. Concluding paragraph is basically, we just provide a short synthesis of the case, just concluding it in 5, 7, 10 lines max, reiterating the main issues. If there are certain additional questions, then we can pose here. So please understand, hook is the main question. Okay, hook is the main issue, main question, but there could be certain additional questions. Additional questions will be sub issues. Okay, so we can talk about sub issues. Sub issue could be, for example, we had a case where this restaurant owner was thinking of scaling up. And scaling up means he had to move from, he was a regional player, and he wanted to explore other regions in the same country. And this was the focus. that how should he go and whether he should scale up or not scale up and those kind of. But the sub questions came about in sense that he had a son and a daughter who were helping him in business. And son was against scaling up and daughter was all in favor of scaling up. So then we brought it down, the sub issues were brought down to a level where you have family, members involved in decision making and business decisions, and how do they support the parents or the managers in taking those decisions. So sub issues were there, but the main focus was here as a business, as a manager, what would you do, right? But then the sub issues were when the family members are involved, then do they really help you, you know, take your business in one direction instead of other, and what kind of hurdles they might uh, pose, or what kind of help will they provide, what kind of competencies do they have that can really help them move in that direction. So all those kind of sub questions were raised. So concluding paragraph needs to be extremely simply written. That's because you're just ending, and most of these students would either read the opening paragraph and the conclusion paragraph, and they would skim through the entire body just to understand that these are the issues around which we are going to next look for information. So here the idea is to be very simple, use very simple language to avoid the clutter. And whenever we are writing a case study, it is very important to be in the shoes of an investigative journalist, but being very honest. It is normal for us to take sides. Okay, sometimes I don't like a phenomena, sometimes I like a phenomena, sometimes I like an organization, sometimes I don't like the organization. So we start feeling a little biased, and my search for information will also be to an extent biased. So if I am writing, for example, about Elon Musk taking over Twitter, and I don't like the way he's dealing with the employees, and employees are leaving the organization because of him, or he's churning them out, then I may develop a certain bias towards him. And if I'm writing about this episode, that negativity will come into the case study. So that is not what I should be doing. I need to understand that I have a very impartial view of this episode. Okay. He is a protagonist. Elon Musk is a protagonist. He is taking certain decisions for Twitter. Are they good? Are they bad? Right? What will be the implication? This is what I'm going to write about, without taking any sides, without criticizing him, but being there as an objective investigative journalist. That's the thing. And don't provide any analysis or lessons learned in the case. That is for the teaching note. Sometimes we try to infuse certain things that, this is what the organization did. So we have to leave that out. Somewhere we have to have that kind of a shutter in our minds that, that just stops us. That, okay, you have presented the question, you have presented the issue, now just stop. Okay. And whatever needs to go as a lesson learned and our analysis or analysis which the students should be doing, that should immediately be put up in a separate file titled a teaching note. So that we need to be very careful about. Students are the best judge. Okay, students are the best judge. So what we have to understand is let them decide about the merits of the case. And therefore, it is extremely critical that we test the case in class. Even if you have made the draft itself, it is better to get it tested in a class. Okay, that's the best experiment that you could do. And I always do that. That is highly recommended. Okay, it also helps you understand what should you highlight and what should you downplay, because students give it out very clearly. They would rather say, this is somewhere I found a lot of information, it was confusing, it did not make any sense. Why do I need this information? However, I needed more information about the let us say the data related to the inventory items. Okay, because I'm taking a decision based on that. So I didn't have much information there. I need more information. I don't need more information about the absenteeism or the number of people in under contractual employment or something of that kind. So they do give this kind of impression, and that is very critical for us to understand. This is a nice article. You could refer to this particular Harvard website, and they have written that what makes you a good case writer? Curiosity. So there is always this thing, as I said, lead whenever it comes to. So, sometimes I may sound a little, um, um, you know, I become too engrossed in terms of looking for leads for writing cases. That's the kind of passion that I have developed for writing cases. So when I'm talking to my, let's say, alumni, or even if I'm going around and meeting people, I am always on lookout for an opportunity to write a case about them. So that is where the curiosity comes into picture. I have to be curious about what is going on around me in the organizations, in the organizations which I know of, which I don't know of, which are handled by my students, ex-students. So that gives me a good amount of understanding and opportunity to find out leads. I have to be very, very comfortable with ambiguity. Okay, I'm not looking out to solve their problems. Please be very clear. When I'm looking at a particular opportunity for a case study, I am not solving their problem as of now. No, I am simply looking at the issues, and I'm looking at the ways in which it can be solved. Okay, because I may have a different perspective, students would have a different perspective, which is fine. That is what I need to brought about. Ambiguity in the real life is there, so we need to bring that out. Important thing, command over the topic or the subject. I know what my subject is. Where is the lacuna? How will I look out for that information which fulfills that lacuna? So unless I am clear about my topic or my course, I will not be able to write a case study. And believe me, you don't need to write it for just because we find certain things and, we can write about it. We shouldn't just go ahead and write about it because we won't be able to use it. So if there's an opportunity to write something about the accounting system, probably I would write it since I know what to write. But the problem is I won't be able to use it that effectively. So it is always good to write cases about topics or subjects which you have command over, not something which is just coming your way. That should be avoided. Ability to relate to the case protagonist, that empathy has to be there. Okay, as I said, you have to be highly non-partial. If I'm looking at a certain person from a perspective that this is what it's right or wrong, I'm not there to morally judge a person. I cannot do that when I'm writing a case study. So I have to be fairly non-partial. I have to be empathetic towards the protagonist. I should be able to relate to that decision making. It is a difficult task, but believe me, it is worth the effort that you put in writing the case study, because then your case study seems very much honest. It is very relatable. Okay. And it is important for us to bring the psyche of the protagonist also in the class. So I'll just show you another case as about Avi Jain, one of our ex-students, and highly successful. But the dilemma in itself was so shrouded, it was shrouded in a lot of other issues. So therefore, bringing about the exact, behavior, or bringing about the exact psychological understanding of that situation was difficult. Okay, so I should be able to think about it. I should be able to relate to it. And therefore, looking at the protagonist, talking to the protagonist, or you're doing it from a secondary source, just reading about that protagonist makes a lot of sense. Okay, try to do that. Enthusiasm for the case method. Case teaching requires cases. That's why we write them, of course. But case teaching should not be just one other tool for you. If you are comfortable in delivering sessions through lectures and you are not passionate about case teaching, then case writing will not make sense. For our cases, for example, for courses like strategy or marketing or human um, um, resource, organizational behavior, these are the cases, these are the courses which are driven through cases. So therefore, for us, it is like essential also, and over a period of time, developing that enthusiasm has become, uh, you know, it has become an exceptional thing. Reason being, a lot is happening. A lot is happening which needs to be captured through cases. So therefore, it is absolutely critical that we become excited about what we are writing. And capacity for finding drama in a business situation, making it feel personal to the students. As I said, when you are reading through a business news, we find lots of good quotes, something which shows the psychology of the protagonist. What are they thinking? How are they expressing their anger? How are they expressing their happiness? All that makes worthwhile while writing a case, because it adds a lot of vividness to the case. As I said, that's the most important thing. Test the case in the classroom before submitting it for publication. It's very, very, very critical. Do not please submit a case for publication if you do not have feedback on that case. It is absolutely critical. It makes your effort a little bit more, but then it's worth it because it helps you make this case much stronger. And that's what we are looking for. For a teaching note, of course, the learning objectives have to be clear. They will come from what you teach. So your course, what frameworks, okay, what tools do you use? Everything will help you craft out good learning uh, objectives. Everything has to be detailed out in a teaching note. So teaching note probably has to be long. Okay, you don't have to worry about the number of pages. Nobody is asking you to cut down on the number of pages, but I'm just sharing that in today's world, people are picking up cases which are moderately long. So 8 to 10 pages is what they are looking at, 8 to 12 basically, including all exhibits and other things. This is what they're looking at. But the teaching note can go up to 20, 25 pages, no harm. I have seen where a case was very small, around 8 to 9 pages, and we had a teaching note which was 40 pages long. A lot of elaboration. So, if you have a very elaborate teaching note, there is no harm in doing that because it helps you clarify your thoughts a little better. So what is the suggested class time broken down by topics? What is the student assignment? How will you open the case? The first 10-15 minutes, how will you summarize the case for the students? How will you ask questions? How will you ask follow-up questions? This can also be given. And this will always be given once you have tested the case in the class. If you have not tested, you would not know what kind of follow-up questions to be there. If there is supporting material, so what worksheets, readings, reference material, what is the audience for your case? And finally, if possible, there should be actually what happened or an update kind of a portion that needs to go into the teaching note. So teaching note can be very elaborate. It can cover everything. And the more information you have in their teaching note about all these issues, better it is. So again, the chances of rejecting a case goes down substantially if we have a well-crafted teaching note. These are the common review comments that people receive. I also give them additional information in order to be taught. So sometimes we are in a hurry to just wrap up the case. Okay, the case is just there, but then the relevant information which can help you take a decision is not there, right? So there has to be a match between case study and assignment questions, or the questions given in the teaching. So if I'm reading the questions, or if these are the questions that you want me to answer, does it have sufficient information in the case? Just do that little bit of matching. Okay, you're asking me, for example, describe the macroeconomic environment environment for, let's say, the EV sector, the electric vehicle sector. So does it provide that kind of information or not? So for example, you have forgotten to write about the customer behavior or consumer behavior. Okay, thinking that this is not probably useful, or I didn't have enough information, that would become a challenge. That would become a challenge, right? So you don't have to avoid anything. You don't have to avoid anything. You have to put it there because that information is critical for you to answer a certain question, right? That is critical. It lacks detail, so sometimes just because we do not have the right kind of information, we would just put frivolous information, all kinds of other information, but actually the information which needs to be there is not there. Okay, so I received a case some time back. It was from a South American country. Okay, and there was a small town in one of the countries, and this town was talking about opening another airport. Okay, it had one airport, so it was about opening another airport. Now, if you have to talk about opening another airport, there are a lot of information which is required about the infrastructure, about the demand and supply, But rather than that, the entire information was about people working at the airport and the local administration. Okay, who are the people who wanted it, who wanted this next airport to be there? Information was more about this, whereas the issue was about the second airport which had to be opened. So we had to see the analysis from the view that whether it makes sense for us to have the second airport or not, right? And this was not there. So again, it was returned for lack of details, and of course it came back with that information. Suggested answers are not supported by the case. This is what I have also said over here. We normally look at the answers that you have written in your teaching note. Are they making sense? Are they supported by the information given in the case? You should ideally not introduce any new information in the teaching note. That is not required. Learning objectives which apply a model without a purpose. Okay, so most of the time, because it is said that a case study or a teaching note should have some framework, some theoretical framework, conceptual framework. So what people have started doing is they have tried force fitting the frameworks. Okay, so every other case you find that 5 forces is there. Every other case you find SWOT is there. Every other case we find that pestle is there. Every other case we find Ansoff is there. Oh, these are not the only frameworks. So please explore. That's why I am kind of repeating it again and again. You need to be very, very thorough with your subject. You have lot of information in a lot of theoretical frameworks which are given in your courses. So try to weave a case around that rather than just picking up what is known to us, right? So let's not get into overdoing of this framework analysis, but rather than that, something which is new, meaningful, let's go ahead and do that. That is more important. Sometimes sample answers are not provided. Sample answers need not be accurate, but they need to be a guiding force. Okay, they need to be guiding the other instructors how to use this case properly. Cases have to be written in the third person and in the past tense. Please understand that it's not. So you may be writing it, you are the case author, but you can't use the pronoun I or me, or it is mine, or the second person. So it has always to be the third person when you write a case study, and it has to be always in the past tense because the thing has already happened. Okay, so everything has to be in the simple past tense. And sometimes the analysis or the lessons learned are not given. So be very clear. And as I said, you can be highly comprehensive in writing a teaching note. Case has certain constraints, but teaching notes do not have that constraint. So make it as elaborate as possible, make it as meaningful as possible, because it helps other instructors pick up the case. And that is our objective. More and more cases from India should be picked up by people across the world. So that should be the objective. Characteristics of a good case. Now we are coming to an end. So it should give us enough information so that students can break it down into relevant facts. And it should not begin with a diagnosis or a prognosis. It should not nudge these students in a certain direction. No, it should just state the facts. It should state the problem, and that's it. And then it should help the students go through it. A good case should challenge the students to make a business case for a particular decision. Okay, decision is very important by articulating how and why they came up with the decision. So let them understand that a decision needs to be taken. And you have to force, as a facilitator, while teaching cases, you have to force students to take a decision. Normally, we just leave the case after discussion like that, okay, because protagonist is somebody else. So we don't position ourselves as the protagonist, and we think, okay, this was meant for some other person to decide. I'm here just to listen to the story and read the story, and discussion just happens around what has happened in the past, rather than forcing the students to actually pick up an alternative and they say, okay, this is what I'm going to do and this is how I'm going to. And good case should provoke students to think laterally, not just unidirectionally, but also look at various instances and various dimensions. So this is where the role of the instructor comes into the picture, that if they have missed out thinking about a particular aspect, it is my duty to kind of again nudge them in that direction. Okay, like Avi Jain case, I'm going to, so this case, there was a sub issue that what will the father do now? Okay, father, so that is not brought out in the main case, but somewhere we have put this information about the parents of Avi Jain. And since he's a self-made entrepreneur, his father is the first generation entrepreneur. So there was a subtext to it. And the instructor needs to bring that out, that you see, father has also loaned you some money. So are you not responsible for giving that money back to your father rather than just moving ahead with your own speed and agility? So that was a subtext. And if the students are not able to catch it, then you have to bring it out in the case. So case is meant to do both analysis and synthesis. And this is where again the skill of the instructor comes into the picture. One is analytical. As I said, if I'm talking about my entry modes into a country, then I know, okay, should licensing work for me, or should I go and have a joint venture, or should I have a wholly owned subsidiary? If these are the options, then I'm analyzing. But then what I do is, towards the end of the case, I synthesize. So I synthesize in the sense that, for example, the class says that they would need to go in for the wholly owned subsidiary. So then I need to synthesize how this is better than the joint venture or licensing. Number one, what needs to be done in order to go in for a wholly owned subsidiary? Okay, what are the implications of this decision for the parent company? So I have put together all the perspectives so that now the students have a broader understanding of one decision and its implications. Good information systems case always involves implementation issues. So we have to understand the implementation, and especially by highlighting the human and socio-political factors in implementation. These all points are written on the Emerald website. I have picked up from there only. So people issues should not be too overwhelming, but when we are talking about cases, then we need to highlight a little bit on the people and socio-political issues because they make the case implication very, very clear. Okay, so it is not just about the organization or the protagonist, but people who will be affected by those decisions. Okay, this is again, I think I have covered a lot of it. About writing a good case and the questions that need to be put up. So So again, I think I have already covered about the story, about establishing the issue, about going in depth about the whys, what the students are supposed to assume, who is the key decision maker. I don't need to repeat this. You could always go ahead and read them. So they are just running in detail about the earlier issues. So we are talking about the opening paragraph, about the body of the case, about the closing paragraph. All this has been written in detail. Identifying leads secondary or primary, both ways are important, and you can find them. Secondary leads, newspapers, news clippings, news items. You read them and you find there are enough leads to help you write a case, and there is good amount of information which is present on the internet for them. Primary, as I said, talk to people around you, your network, your students who have been running businesses. They are into certain companies which may want you to write cases on them. So primary, just keep on exploring. But what is critical, as I said again, know your subject well. It is always a good idea to write cases for your own course first, rather than just writing a case in general. That's important. For example, these are the three case leads I picked up from the newspapers. Very recently, these news items have appeared. Foxconn unit invests 500 million in an Indian affiliate. Now, Foxconn is, as we know, has got a big, huge factory in China, and it is one of the largest assemblers for Apple. Now, this news is related to Apple because Apple has moved into India after their entire China COVID scare. And in today's news only, it was mentioned that Apple will almost double its supply in next 3 years. And Apple has already collaborated with few firms in India which are going to manufacture for Apple. So now this becomes a good entry level case study, how to look at India as a market. You can do a market opportunity analysis there, market segment analysis there, why doing business in India is making sense. A lot of questions that you can ask, and you can build them around your course, right? You could look at it from other perspectives, but I'm looking at it from a strategy perspective, and I find that I can actually make a good small case about this. UK beauty products company Body Shop, it's going to double its business in India by the end of 2025. Again, I can do from the emerging markets perspective, I can do a good, market segment analysis. I can do a competitor analysis here. Okay, and I can do about I can talk about the consumer behavior, the changing consumer behavior in case of Indian consumers, and this becomes the center of my case study. Then there is Thonseri Tea and Industries Limited to acquire 3 tea states, Devhal, Tara Tea, and Duamera of warranty in Assam for around this. So then I'm looking at why acquisitions. So if I have to teach why acquisitions will make sense, I can also talk about it related to the product because it's a commodity, the competitiveness of this kind of a industry is based on cost structure, and then I can develop a case around this. Okay, so the idea is that when we are reading these kind of news items, we have to be very clear as to what they are hinting at, and if I can incorporate those issues in my courses and build my cases around them, then it makes a very good contribution to this entire thing. Right, so I will stop here. I can have questions from you, but before that, let me just share with you. Just a minute. I'll share with you some of these cases. So these are few cases. I have written a lot more, but these are the few cases. This was the case study on Malaysia Airlines. I hope it is visible, right?
Yes,
Ma'am. Yeah, so this is the Emerald case study. This was the first case study that we wrote for Emerald. No, not this. There was a case earlier to this, Pokar. I'll just show you that. So this was the case we wrote based on secondary information. It was about a turnaround of Malaysia Airlines in search of sustainable business model. And this particular case has more than 20,000 downloads since we made it available on ResearchGate. And the if you see this case, it's it's available. You can download it. You can have a look at it from my ResearchGate profile. And the idea was very simple that look at this paragraph. Malaysia Airlines has experienced checkered growth in its past few years. Despite initiating a couple of this, profits remained elusive. Moreover, the company was abuzz with this mass being put up for sale, and government of Malaysia should exit the aviation sector. The reason that other ailing careers like Japan Airlines, Philippines Airlines had sprung back to life after being in the red for a number of years when their government finally decided to sell them off to private players. Industry analysts rationalize that governments all over the world have realized not their job to be in the airline business. So how is it going to now work out for Malaysia Airlines? That was the question. And we picked up all this information from the secondary sources. And in between, you could also see there were some quotes like, at this. His execution was phenomenal. Many CEOs delegate because they are busy, but he was always there watching everyone every day. It took a lot to do that. So Gabriel was talking about it, person who was there in his team. We had inserted a lot of quotes there, right? Look at this, Idris Jala. He was great at talking to people. Analysts are saying this. So we picked it up from the newspaper articles. All this. This case was written based on completely the secondary information. This Pukar was a very interesting case. The company itself is very interesting. It's an NGO, and money is, of course, a challenge there. So we wrote about this particular case and how the entire concept. This is more of a comprehension level case rather than an analytical case. This is more of a comprehension level case. And therefore, it is widely used in the UG classes when you're talking about the non-governmental organizations and how should they be dealing with issues which are related to slums. That is what we have written about. This was the case I was talking about, Avi Jain's case. This was the case. So he is into the home decorative segment business, and there are supply chain issues in his organization, right? He has been profitable. For last 3 years, he has been profitable, but he is growing at a very, very fast pace. And therefore, he needs a lot of money, and he needs to be a little patient also because the competition in the industry is also growing up. So that is where we wrote this case, and that is what we posed as a question. What challenges would a company such a surge in demand? What business model should Homesake adopt for consistent growth in future? Those were the simple questions that we said. And then a lot of information was given in the case to help people appreciate that there are tensions. There was a hook in the case saying that this particular industry is going by leaps and bounds, but as a small player, can you really grow that fast along with the industry? So we wrote about that. Again, a wonderful case. We have been using it internally, and it has been well accepted by the audience across the world. This is a new case that we wrote about. So this is about Del Monte in India. And this is a primary level case. The CEO of Del Monte was known to us, Mr. Yogesh Belani. And that is where we wrote about this particular company, which came into India, started off almost as a startup. And the competition is increasing heavily for this company, despite being a very strong player. So then we wrote about scaling up, about how to see competitive measures are squeezing the margins. So margins is becoming a challenge, and how should you manage your revenue and your growth? That was the problem here. That is what we highlighted. So every case that we have picked up relates to an issue which is important for us to be covered in the course, in our syllabus, or in our course that we are developing, and it becomes really handy for us to use it. So let me close this because we would hardly have time for questions then, and I am open for questions. So please let me know. Yes, please.
Good morning, ma'am.
Yes, please.
A lot of good insights. I have one question regarding a point which you put up on the feedback received from editors.
Right.
How much of the solution should we detail in the case itself? Let me be very specific. If the solution, one of the solutions is say the company has actually gone for a franchising mode. So should that word be indicated in the case, or do you want more details of that particular mode, why they're thinking of franchising? Because then it'll be giving the answer completely to the student.
So again, it depends on you where you want to introduce that mode. So if you want the student to understand the implications of franchising, then you stop it before the franchising. So you could simply say that one of the options is to go for a franchise, but should they go? Should they adopt that? Okay, and then the student should elaborate, student should kind of analyze the entire situation and understand whether franchising is a suitable way to go forward, or should they not go ahead with it. Students might come up and say, no, franchising is not a suitable mode, which is fine. You could always discuss pros and cons of that. And then towards the closure of the class, you could say that they, in fact, went ahead for franchising and this is what happened. So,
Okay.
right. So it depends on what is the objective for that particular course. If I'm using to elaborate on a concept of franchising, I'll stop there. If I want them to go further and if I want them to analyze that, why did the franchising go wrong? So what are the, let us say, limitations of a franchising model? Then I will explore a little bit of franchising in my case. And my question will be now, since it has not delivered the desired results, what should they do? So
Okay.
then I'm leading the students in that direction.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Ma'am, I have a question.
Yes.
Thank you so much for the session, ma'am. I've never written a case earlier, and 90 minutes have been so informative, Thank you so much. I wanted to know, ma'am, before we, decided on a topic, we went and met existing company's owner. There are 4 partners there. So while I was listening to there was a thought process that can the same topic, for example, we met this protagonist and we know the company. Can we write 2 cases, one on the protagonist and one on the issue or the hook that you've spoken about? Does it make sense to break it into 2 parts and then write 2, or should we stick to only one thing?
No, that you can be as creative in a case writing as. So there is a case which is written on cabin care, and I have been using it quite some time. Professor Srinivas of IIM Bangalore wrote this case, and he has written it in 2 parts. So one is about the entrepreneur, the person who established cabin care, the brand, the company, and the second case is about the business model of cabin care. Right, but since he has not updated it, so I've stopped using it. But then you can be as creative as possible. If you're writing about an individual, you can write about the leadership qualities, about the entrepreneurial capabilities, how his journey began. They're learning there also. And the other, you can write about the company and its challenges and its growth mechanisms and other things. So you can be creative. If you have a need and if they provide you an opportunity, you can just go ahead and write 2 cases. No worries.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thanks a lot.
Yes, please. Any other question?
Ma'am, I have a question. Like,
Yes,
see, generally when we write primary cases, it is easier for us to identify or establish someone as a protagonist.
right.
The one whom I have met or derived the information from becomes my protagonist. But in case of secondary cases, how do you decide, how do you establish someone as a protagonist? And second thing, can we present, can we establish entire organization as a protagonist, like
Yes.
you did in case of Malaysia Airline?
Yes. So both the ways are possible. So
Okay.
we can put up the organization as in the center. So organization is facing a challenge. So in that case, for example, competition is increasing, and we are writing about one organization and how its business model is being challenged. So for example, there is a case that I use in my emerging markets class. There are a lot of cases, but case on Amazon, case on Uber, case on Carlsberg. All these companies' cases, they are all written through secondary sources, and the company is at the center. So company is looking to take decision which will help it compete in the global markets, in Indian market, in China market, in Russia market. So there we are not looking at Jeff Bezos, for example. We are looking at the company, because that is the cause of, that's where the decision rests. So we can always put company in the center. The second option is that, for example, you're reading about, let's say Amazon in India and its fight with Reliance and all the other players. And let us say you come across one of the statements given by Jeff Bezos in the newspapers. I can pick that up and I can make that as a center point. So I have kind of made it for the company as well as the protagonist, which is Mr. Bezos. I don't need to define him. I don't need to elaborate more about him because we know him, right? We know a lot about him. Primarily, it is to do with the company, but then it is his tension. He is expressing it. So there it lends more credibility. And therefore, I use that statement as a center point or the hook, and from where I start then writing the case study. So both the options are possible.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Yes. Any more questions from participants? Okay, I'd welcome Dr. Subhashish sir to present the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Kedar. Dr. Shalini, I cannot express what a great experience it was listening to you talk on writing cases and teaching notes. I believe those who are first-time writers will get a lot of insights, even for us who write cases regularly. A lot of insights are there for us also. And we hope to generate lots of cases from this workshop. And if all goes well, we'll have our own special edition from Emerald, cases developed from this workshop. So thank you so much, ma'am. And also, you happen to belong to my alma mater, so that's a double boost for me. So, so good to hear you, ma'am, and hope to see you later in future events also.
Sure. Thank you so much for inviting me. And it was a pleasure. And as I said, case teaching, writing is very close to my heart. So anytime, and I believe you require more of hands-on work to develop cases. Actually, talking about it is easy, but when you are actually doing it, it makes a lot more sense. And
We plan to do that with this workshop. We plan to do a lot of one-on-one mentoring with the participants.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and my pleasure is all mine. Have a good day. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
So next we will have our second session. We'll take a break of around 15 minutes and join here once again. Thank you all for joining.